All right, we're going to dive into the story of a tiny island nation in the Pacific and explore how a single church got woven into its very identity. It's an incredible journey, really, from what looked like a total failure to a genuine spiritual phenomenon. And it all kicks off with one simple, but honestly staggering question. I mean, think about that. How does any church go from just a handful of followers to becoming the faith of more than half an entire country? In Tonga, this isn't just some interesting statistic. It's a demographic shift that's almost unheard of anywhere else in the world. Yep, you're seeing that right. Over 50%. It's a huge number. But to really get how this happened, you first have to understand the deep spiritual roots of Tonga itself. See, long before the first Latter-day Saint missionaries ever showed up, Tonga was already a nation that was just steeped in faith. Way back in 1839, King George Tupou I officially committed his whole country to God. He established this powerful motto, "God and Tonga are my inheritance." Faith wasn't just a part of life there, it was the national inheritance.
But just because they had that shared foundation in faith, it didn't mean instant success for the church. Not at all. In fact, the beginning in Tonga was marked by a lot of struggle and, really, near total failure. The first attempt, which started in 1891, was a bust. I mean, they got the king's permission and everything, but after 6 long years, they had fewer than 15 converts. So the mission closed. But when they came back in 1907, they had a new strategy. They weren't just going to preach, they were going to teach. They set up a school, and that decision, well, it changed everything.
So we're back to that big question. How do you go from that kind of rocky start to becoming a cornerstone of life in Tonga? The answer, it turns out, isn't really found in mission strategies or church programs. It's found in the radical, personal faith of the Tongan people themselves.
The growth of the church in Tonga was really built on these 2 huge pillars, just immense personal sacrifice and this unwavering belief in divine promises. And these weren't just, abstract ideas. They were lived realities, shown in the most extraordinary ways.
For these early members, faith was never a passive thing. It was a verb. It was an action. It demanded pretty much everything they had, physically, financially, and emotionally. And this commitment, wow, it's just so brilliantly illustrated in the lives of these individuals who became local legends. Take a guy named Vea Taufofo. As a young leader on one of the outer islands, just getting to a meeting was an epic journey. And his words here, they capture the spirit of the time perfectly. The challenges weren't obstacles, they were actually what made their faith stronger.
And believe me, calling it a challenge is a massive understatement. This wasn't just a long commute. This was an all-day trek. It involved walking 7 miles to the coast, waiting for the entire ocean to recede at low tide, and then wading through the sea to another island just so he could keep walking. All of that for a single meeting. Sometimes he'd even have to wait overnight just to make the trip back home.
This spirit of sacrifice went way beyond just physical effort. It hit their finances in the most profound ways. See, before a temple was built in Tonga, the nearest one was all the way in New Zealand. That's 1,300 miles away. For the Kongafonka family, getting there was a dream that required a radical choice. They sold everything, their house, their cookhouse, a bicycle, a sewing machine. They literally liquidated their entire life for a one-way trip.
They came home with nothing, living in a small hut. But what happened next is what makes this story so incredibly powerful. 2 years later, a devastating hurricane tore through the islands and destroyed almost everything. And in that moment of shared loss, Vili Kongaika had this profound realization. The storm made everyone poor, sure, but his family had already traded their worldly stuff for something eternal.
So that's the first pillar, sacrifice. The second pillar of Tongan devotion was this incredible, almost stubborn belief in promises and prophecy, a kind of faith that could withstand decades of doubt and even public ridicule.
So let me tell you about Waikato Tautu. Back in the late 1930s, she was promised in a blessing that she would live to see a chapel built on her small island. And in that moment, she had a vision of the building in perfect detail, right down to its shining gold steeple. So she told everyone what she'd seen. But years passed, then decades, and no chapel. People started to mock her, some even called her a liar, but she never ever wavered.
Finally, years and years later, building missionaries showed up to construct the chapel. Waikato's descriptions of the layout were so freakishly accurate, they wondered if she'd somehow seen the blueprints. But, and this is a big but, there was one problem. Her vision was of a shining gold steeple. The steeple that was delivered from the church, it was silver. It looked like her vision was flawed after all. But then, in this completely unexpected twist, that silver steeple got diverted to another project. The replacement that finally arrived was made of bronze, and when the sun hit it just right, it shone just like gold. After decades of ridicule, her vision was fulfilled down to the very last detail.
And get this, Waikato, who's now about 102 years old, she didn't just sit back and watch this happen. She worked on that construction site every single day, carrying these heavy, sharp coral bricks until her hands bled. When someone offered her gloves, she refused, saying that the Savior's hands had bled for her, and she was not ashamed for hers to bleed for his work. So you have these incredible stories of personal faith, and they laid all the groundwork. They created this deep spiritual foundation that the institutional church could finally be built on, transforming all that individual devotion into a true national presence. And you can literally see the growth happen in stages. It really kicked off in 1952 with Liahona High School, which educated a whole new generation of leaders. That led to this pivotal moment in 1955 when a visiting church president prophesied a temple would one day be built in Tonga. That promise fueled the growth that led to their very first stake in 1968 and ultimately to the prophecy being fulfilled with the Tonga Temple in 1983. And the results of all that faith? Just explosive. From less than 16,000 members in 1970, the church in Tonga tripled in size over the next 20 years. This wasn't just some institutional program. It was the harvest of countless individual acts of sacrifice and just unwavering belief.
So, what is the lasting legacy of these Tongan pioneers? Well, it's a legacy where deep, personal faith becomes completely inseparable from the national identity itself.
When you really look at the Tongan story, a few clear patterns just jump right out. It shows that true faith isn't passive, it's an action, and it's proven by sacrifice. It's a belief in promises so strong it can hold a community together for decades. And it's a testament to how the devotion of just a few individuals can build a spiritual inheritance for an entire nation.
That inheritance, born from bleeding hands and sold-out homes and journeys across the ocean floor, it's now a fundamental part of what it even means to be Tongan.
And that leaves us with one final big question to think about. In a world where values and identities are always shifting, what happens to a nation when the faith of its people, proven through such radical sacrifice, becomes its single most defining story?